All right, welcome back, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks for joining us again at Goyette, Ruano, and Thompson, and law offices of Mark Peacock. And once again, I'm joined by my good friend and personal injury expert, Mr. Mark Peacock. Mark?
Yep, nice to be here.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Good
to
see you, bud.
Hair's looking great as usual.
Still there.
Yeah.
That's important.
No, it's one of your best assets. In a previous episode, what we talked about is what your office looks for as our personal injury of counsel for what you look for in a personal injury case. And you talked a lot about damages, that you specifically look at damages. In fact, you look at damages first and foremost before you get into the weeds on liability.
That's correct.
Now, I want to expand on that conversation on damages a little further and have you talk about how the employment context affects damages. Now, the example you gave last time we talked was the police officer going code 3 through the intersection, going to an emergency call, someone doesn't hear the lights and siren, serious accident in the intersection, the police officer is injured.
Right.
He may be at fault, he may not be at fault, but that's not what you look at. But he's working, he's on the job. Now, he's injured, he can't work, and maybe he's injured so bad he can never work. He goes out on a disability retirement. So that's what I want to ask about is what impact does that have? What impact does the fact that an officer is off work for some amount of time and the interplay of the workers' comp system, and then what impact does it have if that officer is to have, say, a disability retirement where he can't work, he or she can't work ever again?
Yeah, okay, that's a very good question. That's the catastrophic environments for a lot of officers. They suddenly cannot continue with their employment and their livelihood, and that can affect everything from marriage, family, home ownership, all kinds of things that are just you could think through and understand. That's the big one right there. Okay, so if somebody's career is cut short because of a vehicle accident, or really because of damages, because of injuries, physical injuries, they're not cleared to go back to work. I would say that just a quick side note on that. If you don't do public safety, if you don't represent these people, you're not going to be aware of some of the nuances to look for. If you don't represent union people who get vehicle accidents like this, you're not going to know what to look for. You're going to be thinking just generally, oh, he broke his leg, that's X amount of dollars, how much insurance do they have? You're not going to be thinking about, okay, he's not going to be able to get back to work. What kind of an impact is that going to have on him? The whole system the workers' compensation system does help that officer out to a certain extent, but it doesn't provide ultimate relief for that officer. So let me give you an example of that. The officer is rolling code, gets into a vehicle accident, and is off work.
Using our code 3 intersection
yes,
example.
If that's okay.
Please.
So that officer is now going to be without income. Typically, that's what they have a certain amount of time before what I call the financial abyss occurs, and they get paid what's called 4850 time, which is basically 2/3 of their salary, but they don't get overtime. And especially nowadays, this is a little nuanced thing that a lot of attorneys won't know if they don't represent these guys for a living. Is that hey, these guys count on overtime as almost part of their salary. A lot of these they think of it like, okay, I work an extra 60 hours a month. I get this much money, and that's just part of their income.
They factor it into their lifestyle.
Absolutely. And by the way, by doing that, they buy a bigger house, they buy a second car, they help out their kid going to a school, whatever it might be.
All goes into the economy somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah. And if suddenly that officer's ability to provide for their family occurs, then they suddenly start getting kind of nervous, and they suddenly start living off of donated time. People will donate time to them so they can kind of try and survive. They start credit cards, savings, and things like that. And now the financial abyss is suddenly coming in front of them going, okay, wait a minute. They're not releasing me back to work. I have one doctor or two doctors saying you can't do it. Your leg hasn't healed well, or whatever the injury is. What's going on in that environment is the amount of the worth of the damages, the worth of the case is beginning to rise like crazy, okay, like exponentially fast. Every day that officer is not able to get back to work, there's all kinds of damages that are occurring. Okay, and that's one of the reasons why you file right away, because you want to know exactly how much insurance that other driver has, or if they're in the course and scope, or if they have other kinds of assets.
I see, because you mentioned in a prior episode that you like to file that lawsuit. Unlike most lawyers I've interacted with, you like to file that lawsuit like right from the get-go.
Yeah, I'd file the day of the accident if I could.
If you could.
Yeah, if I could, yes. And the reason is pretty simple. You get bigger recoveries for the clients, and you get it done faster. Clients always ask me two questions. How much am I going to get, and when? And those are legit questions. These people's lives have been impacted, and they're damaged, and a lot of them can't work, especially these retirement kind of cases. They can't work. And they're suddenly at a young age having to look at switching careers. That's a huge deal. Could you imagine doing that at age 40? Suddenly you've been a police officer for 10, 15 years, and suddenly you can't do it anymore. You have to go into whatever. You have to get rehabbed, vocationally rehabbed, and create a new career. That is an incredibly difficult thing to do.
That's tough. And I have noticed in all our work with public safety employees, whether it's police or fire, they're very highly trained, but very specifically trained on their job.
Yes.
But not necessarily are those transferable skills out to a lot of other things out there in the world.
You are correct. That's exactly what happens. So a lot of times they'll want to, become a security guard, or they'll want to do security work or background work or things like that. Those industries don't necessarily exist anymore, and
nor do they pay very well.
That's what I was going to say. They don't pay as much. The benefits aren't there. So suddenly it's a downgrade. Suddenly it's a very, very negative environment. And that financial abyss I was talking about, that starts rushing at them. And so they want to get things resolved, and especially if they're going to be retiring, because when you retire, their employer comes in with what's called a lien. The employer wants part of the recovery. And then you have the retirement program. Here in California, they vary, but generally it's like CalPERS. The retirement programs for a lot of the police agencies. Anyway, they also want some of the money back. So they get involved, and suddenly you have these two governmental entities, your employer and the retirement system, wanting part of your recovery.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, and that's another reason why you want to know exactly how much insurance do these people have on the other side. What does their asset profile look like, things like that, because you want to maximize that recovery. You want to go right at it.
We could probably do a whole series of episodes on the complications of, I think what you're talking about is really subrogation, and where all the various parties have their hands out to get part of the recovery, whether it's the retirement association or the workers' comp system.
It is, and if you know what you're doing, you use that to your client's advantage.
100%.
Yeah, it increases the value of your client's case.
How do you do that, Mark? How do you use those competing systems to your client's advantage?
It's somewhat simple if you know how to do it. And what you do is you contact the workers' comp insurance company that's paying disability to your client, medical treatment, things like that, and they'll give you what's called a lien. They'll give you their receipt almost. The same thing is true with the retirement with Cal. I'll just use CalPERS. Mm-hmm. That you contact them, and per code, by the way, it's per law. You contact them, advise them, hey, our guy is getting retired out because of that accident. What's your lien? And they'll come in and they'll give you a big fat lien number. Okay, and you use that to show the other side how badly damaged your client is. And when they do that, their insurance, that's why you're staring at their insurance policy. And a lot of times they go, I can't believe that a broken leg is resulting in this officer being retired out, and you're telling me that CalPERS has a $500,000 lien and the city has $300,000 lien, and they can't wrap their heads around it. So there is a process where you have to educate that insurance adjuster on the other side and the attorney that represents the other side. However, you overwhelm them with the evidence, because those are real things. The other thing is the loss of earnings stuff. The loss of earnings profile for officers or firefighters, whoever it might be, that can get quite substantial. So, for example, if they have 10, 15 years left on the clock
In their career,
and suddenly they can't do it, it's not just a straight analysis like, hey, I make $100 a year times 15. It's not like that. It's missed opportunities. You get an economist involved, you get experts involved, and what are they doing? They're expanding. They're actually revealing what the actual real economic damage is of your client. So that adds a breadth of the numbers are astronomical. So if you have somebody who's not able to do their job, not only are they missing salary, they're missing promotions, they're missing overtime, all kinds of things that attach to that, and benefits, health benefits, things like that for family members and things like that. And you quantify it all and you put it off to the side. You go, this case is worth this.
So that becomes a very large number in a hurry.
Very large number, and very, very quickly. Even if a client has like 2 or 3 years left versus 15 years left on their career, 2 or 3 years left is still an incredible number. It raises the value of the cases very quickly. If you know what you're doing, you file right away. You get those things defined as quickly as you possibly can, and you give them to the other side as fast as you can, and you start marching towards the money. Because you want to get your client the money. Because that abyss I was talking about before, that's a real thing. The system will help to a point, and then boom, it's not there anymore.
Wow. And I guess money today, whatever the value, is worth a whole lot more than some uncertain amount of money tomorrow.
Exactly. So there is, there's a very obvious benefit to the client to get the thing done as quickly as you possibly can. By the way, that's not selling out. That's maximizing the recovery. That's what that is. So filing right away, you increase the pressure on the other side. And I always tell clients this, if you want to get something done, you put pressure on it, right? If your kid's not doing something, you put pressure on them to do it right, or whatever it might be. And the same is true in law. So if you file a lawsuit, you're now putting pressure on the others, on the offending driver, you're putting pressure on the insurance company on the other side, and you're putting pressure on the attorney. Okay, the attorney, a lot of times, they don't want to be handling these losing environments, especially if they're in-house. So now you've created pressure environment, and they will react to that pressure. That insurance company, they're just risk-benefit analysis all day long. So they'll look at it in a completely different light. If you file a lawsuit, pressure. That means I'm an adjuster. I have to decide: do I hire him a private attorney? Do I hire this attorney through the law firm, through the insurance company? We call it in-house, private, whatever it might be. So you're putting pressure on the insurance company to do something that they don't want to do. Spend money. They don't want to give the money up.
And I would assume insurance companies want to buy time as well. I mean, I know they don't want to pay money out, but time's also valuable to them as well, right?
Oh yeah, that's a whole discussion. The time and delay benefits the defense. Of course. There's no question about it. It may feel nice to have an extra day to figure something out, but the reality is it benefits them, especially if it's outside counsel that's representing the offending driver. They get to bill. So they get the bill for their time. So they have families that they have to provide for too. So they build these cases up regardless of whether or not it's the right thing to do to get them resolved quickly.
In summary, if I'm getting this, is your recommendation is, first of all, examine damages regardless of liability, file the lawsuit as soon as possible, and then take a hard look at whether the client needs a retirement or a disability retirement, because that is going to drive the case up exponentially in terms of value.
Absolutely.
Well, I guess the last thing I would comment on is I've noticed throughout my career that when it comes to firefighters and police officers and other public safety professionals like corrections, what disables a police officer, for example, wouldn't disable you or I as lawyers. For example,
right.
They could have a hand injury on their shooting hand and be perfectly fine everywhere else, but if they can't shoot that weapon, they can't do the job.
Can't qualify.
So then they would be eligible for disability retirement.
Yes.
Wow.
That's a good example. Those kinds of nuances occur. Those kinds of examples occur all the time.
Sure.
So if you work for Walmart and you break your leg, you can work for Walmart the next week. It's not that they retire you out. If you're a police officer and you break your leg, you might not be able to do your job. And the analysis is, hey, not only protecting yourself, protecting your partner, protecting the public, and even protecting the perpetrator.
Sure.
So if you're unable to do that, boom, you get forced retirement a lot of times. So that's another reason why you want to file right away. I know I keep getting back to that, but that's a key component. And it really does surprise me that a lot of attorneys don't do it.
No. In fact, none do that I've interacted with, and I think that's why we've enjoyed such a good working relationship over the years, is that you do so many things differently than the herd of other lawyers out there, and this is one of the most prominent things that I found to be, at least in my observation, super effective.
Yeah, and by the way, on that, I'll give you a real-life example. There is, Dave's still with us, thank God. Was a Long Beach police officer, and a year and a half ago, he gets in a vehicle accident down by the ports near L.A., and he gets scrunched by a company truck. So a company truck is going to have a lot of insurance, by the way, hits my client, police officer on duty, squeezes him, they crash. My client is all he's thinking about is, oh, workers' comp will take care of this. Very typical government employee. The system will take care of me. These are honorable thoughts, by the way. They're not, it's hard to criticize them. They're honorable thoughts. The system will take care of me. The system is workers' comp. Then guess what? Hey, Dave, it looks like you might not be able to go back to work. You got 2 shoulder surgeries coming up. Like, oh, wow. So he's talking to a mutual friend who's actually ex-president of the union, and talking to a guy named Steve. Talking to Steve about it. Steve's like, oh, you should call Peacock. So I get a phone call from Dave. It's been a year and a couple months since the accident.
Wow.
And I'm meeting with him at his
like
house.
14 months later.
Yes, and I'm going, okay, so you got into a vehicle accident. Was it your fault? He's like, no, not my fault at all. I'm like, okay. And you're going to get, he goes, yeah, I think I'm getting medically retired out on disability.
Sure.
I'm like, okay. So who hit you? He's like, well, here's a copy of the accident report. I get it. I'm like, okay. So here's
a
what
commercial
we're gonna do.
truck.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, okay, so Dave, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to file a lawsuit tomorrow. Okay. And by the way, I didn't mention this before. How do you expand the damages? Dave, are you married? Yes. Okay. Her name's Megan. Megan, you have what's called a loss of consortium claim. Expands the value of their damage. It's more accurate at what their damages is. Because now wife has to do all the, cut the lawn, get the kids in the car, all the kinds of, go to the grocery store, all the kind of stuff.
Got to do all the heavy lifting at home.
Suddenly you're giving a realistic picture of what their damaged environment is, right? And this company over here thought that they had skated free. They had no liability. Accident happens, so who's taking care of Dave? Who's taking care of? The system. Workers' comp, and then CalPERS is going to come in. Nobody's thinking of the company. I see it, I'm like, holy crap. That company's going to have insurance on top of what you're going to get over here.
Of course.
You're getting medically retired. You got 2 kids, Dave, and they're teenage. They're 2 kids you got to provide for. Bam, bam. So suddenly Dave's he's gonna max out with his medical retirement and do this kind of thing, but he's also going to get a chunk of money from the company, and they're going to have this particular company has about $10 million worth of insurance, but for him. Talking to the union president and getting to me.
He would have never known.
He would never have known that. And guess what? If the 2 years had come and gone, adios, too late to file a lawsuit. You've walked away from 7 figures. When I'm doing trainings and things like that, that's what I'm telling these guys. Keep your eyeballs open and ask questions. Is this the only way to get recovery on this accident? Oftentimes it's not. There's other things.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's part of why we're bringing this information to you. And if you are finding this useful and helpful, please hit the like button and please subscribe as well. But the message we want to get out to you and anyone you know out there is exactly what Mark said. Ask the question. Think broadly. Don't just think that the public sector workers' comp system is all there is that will take care of you, because in all likelihood, there's a lot more.
Exactly.